Joining me now is New York Post columnist Karol Markowicz, who used to live in New York, now lives in the great state of Florida. Karol, good to see you. Thanks for being here. You know, as you can imagine, the media is all over this, you know, with these frightening images of DeSantis as being the puppet master controlling all the school boards in Florida. What do the people of Florida think about this?
The ones that I've spoken to love this. They love that the governor is getting involved in school board races. They think that it's time that school boards were, you know, treated as important by the Republican Party. For so long, Democrats have been getting involved in the school board races. They get George Soros money, they get Hollywood money, and yet the Republicans have never really answered this. And so I love the idea of this governor asking school board members what they believe and supporting them based on that. And so it's easy for voters to have a kind of a list or an agenda for these school board members and know what they're getting when they vote for them.
By the way, I believe your kids are in public schools in Florida, correct?
Yeah.
So
yes,
what is your impression now? I mean, you have about over a year now to compare the Florida public schools with New York public schools, which are of course run by much more liberal school boards. What do you think?
Yes. So we've been here since January. I am so impressed. And we also spent 5 months last year in Florida kind of doing a test run. So we've seen 2 different school districts in Florida. And I'm incredibly impressed. I have kids at different levels, and I think that the schools have really met them where they are. I'm amazed at the amount of things that these schools can do without a state income tax. It's really amazing and impressive to me. I love it. I think it's terrific.
You know, you bring up a great point. I mean, I know money is not the biggest deal here. We're worried about our kids' future. But in New York, we're spending $35,000 per student to educate the kids. And where does that money go? You know, that's always, you follow the money. That's the first rule in journalism. And I don't know the answer to it. I think a lot of it is not necessarily to the teachers, but to the bureaucracy, the sort of school bureaucracy writ large, which includes a lot of people that are extraneous to a kid's education.
That's absolutely right. So much of it goes towards administrative costs, but they also are paying for so many different boondoggles, like the CRT, different groups come in and do seminars for the teachers, or books are bought on these topics. And this doesn't exist in Florida. So it's like I always say, you know, every minute that is spent on CRT or gender ideology is a minute not spent on math and reading. But the same thing is true for money. Every dollar that is spent on CRT consultants is a dollar not spent on textbooks. So we have the situation in Florida where these things are not allowed to be taught in the classroom, and it really does lead to a stronger curriculum and better education. Now,
you know, obviously there was all kinds of misinformation about the new rules that DeSantis implemented, the rules forbidding the kind of teaching to young kids that is just totally inappropriate to particularly to young kids. And what has been has there been enough exposure to that new policy to tell you whether it's working or not?
Well, not quite yet, but I think it's such an obvious policy. I mean, the law is called Parental Rights in Education. It's not anything else. It tells you that you have the right for your small child not to learn gender ideology in the classroom when they're in kindergarten through 3rd grade. This is so sane. There's nothing crazy about this. This is something that parents, you know, sort of every ideology would probably support. What parent wants their 1st grade kid learning about, you know, that they could be a girl one day and a boy the next day, instead of learning about how to read or learning about math? I think it's just such an obvious thing, and I haven't yet to meet a single Floridian of any political ideology stripe that does not support this.
And by the way, it is not neutral. It is not a neutral explanation of you know, well, there's this way and that way. It is pushing an ideology, pushing a very definitive ideology. It is not at all neutral. The other thing is that it is crowding out, all these other stuff was crowding out the basic 3 R's. And as we know, all across the country, even before the pandemic, by the way, we'd seen test scores go down and down. The more money we spend, there's an inverse relationship to spending money and the test scores. Is that changing at all in Florida?
So you're absolutely right. I think all the schools that used to focus on the old buzzword, which was multiculturalism, also saw a decrease in test scores. Again, it's not rocket science. It's like every minute you spend on some other nonsense is a minute you don't spend on academic subjects. So even if you are on the left, and I've met plenty of liberal parents who support, for example, this law in Florida, and they believe that, yeah, maybe this is stuff I want to teach my own kids at home, but I don't want them learning it in school because it detracts from their academic learning. It's so obvious. And I think so many things that Governor DeSantis does is so obvious, and he's a parent and he knows.
Right. If we're going to compete with the rest of the world, we got to get better at getting those test scores up. It's very simple. Karol Markowicz, quick.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon. Thank you so much, Karol. Appreciate it.